out over the years, and I'm really excited for everybody to get to know them. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let everybody introduce themselves. David, if you want to kick us off, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm David Siciliano. I'm out in Orange County, California. I'm the founder and creative director of Savvy Studios. We're a video production company that focuses on content campaigns as opposed to one-off stuff. So we work with small to medium-sized businesses and try to help them marry strategy and efficient production with, instead of throwing away money on one big video. We do some other stuff too, but that's our main thing.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about cash flow. It's a big topic.
Yeah, cool. Portia, you want to take it?
Hey y'all, I'm Portia. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia. I run Go Work Girls, and we are a collective of freelancing women. We specialize in branding and marketing strategy. I'm strategy. I have people who do design and folks who do web development. And so I'm just here to coordinate everything, tell people what to do, and then also come up with the plans. So yeah, quick thing.
Cool. Josh, want to take it?
I'm Joshua. I'm based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I am co-founder of Lavender the Agency, which is like a content house, creative house, all that kind of stuff. We do a lot of like content production for like TV or social and stuff like that, but we've been doing websites and other stuff like that too. So it's becoming full service.
Nice. We're gonna talk about that. Yeah, cool. Fun fact, Josh's agency Lavender actually does our ads. So the videos that maybe y'all have seen on Instagram, that's all them. Sarah, you want to?
Best client.
Yeah, we got part 3 coming soon. Sarah, you want to take it?
Sure. Hey everyone, I am Sarah. I run Ampersand and Ampersand. We say we're a full service branding collective. And what we do is we focus on small to medium sized businesses that are in a moment of pivot. So we help them show and tell their news story to the world through collaboration, coaching, content creation. We kind of come in, explode whatever's going on, and then make sure they have the tools that they can take it and run with it when we're long gone.
Amazing. Wow, that's really interesting angle, honestly. That's cool. I love that. All right, cool. So we're gonna just dive in now to sort of how y'all are running your businesses. You know, in terms of first things first, like talk to us a little bit about, you know, how you continue to sort of scale up. And actually maybe Josh, we can start with you and how you're sort of expanding your services. Like, how did you go from, you know, maybe one person to start and then you started to scale up with other people and, you know, business got bigger?
Yeah. So for most of my life, I've been like a freelance filmmaker. That's what I kind of got started in throughout like high school and college. But when I was leaving college, I started this agency with 2 co-founders, and it was just kind of like me still doing video, and then we added some social, we added some photo, all that kind of stuff. We were just trying to find clients. And, you know, for a while it was fine just being us 3, like we were managing everything just fine. We were getting some clients, but like growth was hard, especially like with film, because it's so time consuming and like I'm only one person. That at some point we're like, okay, we need to start working with other people. And so, you know, because we weren't in a place where we could start, you know, hiring full-time people, and at least hiring them in a way that like their wage is, you know, livable. We were like, okay, let's just start partnering with people. And that's kind of how it happened, which was scary because like, you know, when you're a freelancer, all of your money coming in is all of your money, right? And sort of letting go of that and figuring out like how cash flow actually works, that's basically what it is, was sort of the struggle. But definitely just the scalability is coming from being willing to like delegate and push work off to other people, and then just, you know, kind of building a team around whatever project you have. At this point too, we have hired 2 people full-time. So awesome. That just kind of helps us move a little bit faster internally as we're still collaborating with other people, but for certain things. So it's just, you know, I guess it's true that the more money you spend, the more you can make, the more you can spend. So that's kind of the basis.
Yeah. It's a tricky game to play. I feel like it's interesting, you know, well, I guess I'm curious too. And like, Portia, I'd be curious to hear from you, just in being sort of like the person that's coordinating everything. What's one of the more like intimidating pieces of this scaling up? Is it figuring out like how much should we pay everybody? Is it figuring out, what should we charge the client? Like, how did that sort of go for you, and what does that look like?
So I consider us like fair trade branding and marketing. Everyone tells me what their price is, and I basically just charge more than what they charge. And it took me like a long time to be okay with that, because if they're charging $2,500 for brand identity and I'm charging, the hourly rate that I charge is $197. My designer is only charging like $65 an hour. So I was like, shit. She's making $2,500 for brand identity and I'm making that much and I didn't do anything. So I had to be like, okay with that, but I'm doing a lot being the face of the business and like putting the proposals together and going to find people. And like, I guess I just had to overcome the imposter syndrome of owning my business. Like, Portia, you're doing all this work. And so that was the thing. The question of like, when did I decide to scale? I'm a strategist. So I was like, you need brand strategy, you need marketing strategy. And clients are like, I also need a website. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't do that. But I know people who do. And so I was sick of like giving the work away. I was like, I can make money off of this, So we're a collective. Come freelance under Go Work Girls. That's how I got started. But yeah, basically I just charge a lot more than the people that I'm working with.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that also I think hits on a really interesting topic, and a topic that we don't talk about enough, which is like how agencies make money, which is through marking up on time and labor, basically. And so like they, coming from the big agency world, a lot of them don't want you to really know that because they're marking up by 600%, but in these small collectives, that is what you have to do to make margin. And it's just, it is a lot of work to manage the client and the project and make sure everything runs smoothly. Like that is such a huge lift. David, Sarah, how have your experiences been? And talk to us a little bit about your margins and markups. Like, how do you think about that? And where was that inflection point?
Ladies first, I insist.
I mean, it's definitely something I struggle with. The first part of my career was working in media at large heritage brands. And so we would work with big agencies, and the understanding is just like, well, right, they're charging a markup. That's kind of like the price you pay for working with a big agency. And then when I ventured out on my own, the expectation becomes, well, you're just paying for these individual people. And so there needs to be that in between. And I find that, especially in early days, it was wildly swinging client to client. So I would have some clients where I was not marking it up nearly enough and I was paying out more than I was really taking in. And then
been there.
The other ones where I'm like, I'm not going to make that mistake. And then I'm maybe probably overcharging and making sure I'm over delivering until you kind of find this spot of like, yes, this is where we need to be.
Yeah, I've definitely been there.
Yeah.
David.
Same. I agree. I mean, I feel like for me, the first step was just making sure everything I was doing was getting paid for. I mean, I don't know. I bet Josh can relate to this, but I started as a freelance filmmaker as well, and a lot of the prep time is just free. That's what the assumption is, and then like you get paid for the day you show up to do the job, and then maybe you get paid for some of the editing time. So for me, it was okay. Let's like first just get paid for all the time I'm being spent. And then this next step, this last couple of years has been, okay, well, now that we're doing that and we're hiring people, making sure that everything has some kind of markup. But that's mostly just because I also worked at a big agency, and I looked at a couple of the budgets and asked a couple of questions, and they were kind of like, well, it should take this much time, but if we can do it faster, good on us. And that's how we make money. And I kind of thought, oh,
yeah,
no one told me that.
Yeah, I know, it's interesting that we don't really talk about it. And it's funny because like, the other thing, that we were really thinking about in building the platform out was like this idea of like peer-to-peer transparency, and this idea of like understanding what other people are charging, just understanding like what you're agreeing to and for how much. And I think it's so important because with any other type of business, if you go to buy a book or you're a book seller, what other books cost, like what the going rate is for certain things when physical products, but when it comes to putting a price tag on a person, it gets complicated. And I think the hourly situation is really tough because it sort of forces you to, negotiate your own like self-worth to a certain extent, right? And you're like trying to justify like, no, I am worth as a person this much money. Whereas, when we're talking about like the services and putting a price tag on those things, it feels a little bit more like productized, and that, you can see sort of what the standard is for a competitive audit, but then you can adjust it from there. Because I think that's a really tough thing when it comes to what to charge. You know, everybody's been on both sides of that table too. The client, you try to buy services, one agency quotes you 10 grand, the other one quotes you 100 grand, and you're like, what the fuck? Like, what do I,
Yeah.
too good to be true or what?
I'll add to that because that's something I'm very passionate about, especially having done the agency thing, which I know you have as well, Rachel. I feel like for most of what we're doing in this topic is just making sure all the terms and the scope is really spelled out. You know, like we're doing this kind of color correction, not this kind of color correction, and we're doing this kind of mixing, not this kind of mixing, because a lot of the times people don't know, and they're like, oh, but like we need to match all the products to the exact shade of color across the whole thing. It's like, well, you're paying $300 for color, like that gives you maybe an hour. So, you know, I feel like for us, it's been getting really specific about, you know, what is your budget? Okay, that pays for this much stuff. And the more specific it is, the safer we are. And then the more we're getting paid in the end, because we're not being like, oh, okay, well, we'll squeeze it in somehow.
Yeah. Portia, I'm curious. Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
I say yes, and that I think what I do additionally is I will get really specific about what it is that they're buying and what it is that they get, but I actually shy away from doing blanket markups because I feel like then it kind of makes a weird relationship with the client where they're expecting then that there's like a level of fluff, there's like a level of margin in there that they can negotiate in some way. So I've been trying lately to move more towards treating everything as a hard cost. So in some of that prep work to be educating the client or walking them through things, it's like, let's bill for that. Like that takes time, that has value. And if that's something that they feel like they need to cut, then you can say, well, then this is how this has to be supplied. And like, it gives them the ability to kind of weigh their priorities without feeling like we're pulling a fast one. And then also with running, you know, subcontractors and stuff, you still have that transparency of like, this is what I'm walking away with also. And I have found that to be, when I can do it, it's a lot more helpful.
Yeah, that's really great. I think too, you both touched on something that like expectation versus reality, and like what you sort of think is going to happen, and like I'll quote it at this, and then what actually happens. I'm curious, like, does anyone have any thoughts on how you handle that, and like, obviously, at least at my experience of running our own studio, the scope always changes. It just, you know, and you want to be accommodating to your client, you know, you want to meet their needs. You don't want to be too rigid about it and nickel and dime people, but also it really does eat your margin. So how about scope changes? How's everybody handling that in terms of, you know, expectation versus actuals?
I do like three, I charge or I quote likely hours, but then I do like low hours and high hours. So at least when they're looking at it, they have an idea of what it could be. And then I put like, if we go over, we'll ask for more budget to be approved. So they kind of have this like expectation that it could go over. This is how much it's going to cost if it does, but here's likely hours, high hours, and then low. And then on my contract or the subcontractor, I'm like, tell me the highest amount of hours possible, because that's what I'm going to add as our likely hours. And then I know that if you do go over, I don't have to surprise the client like, okay, you know, actually we're going to go up higher. But yeah, I tell them, give me the highest amount you think this is going to take. And then that's the likely hours. And so far it's working.
I think that's a great, like the scaling system and like, you know, making sure that you're at the higher end of things is, I think, probably the safer route to go than trying to like get it as cheap as possible and just to like close the sale. At a certain point, that gets you into hot water. I feel like later down the line where you're like, oh man, I should agree to this, but sale's a sale. Josh, production is like a beast, right? Because you got like out-of-pocket costs and
you're
like
idea what's going on,
renting cameras and whatever else that is happening. My girlfriend works in production, and like how do you manage all that?
Over communication, I think, is one of the big things, because like it's bound to change. And I think Portia made some great points of like, first off, like, yeah, like when you're subbing with people, like what's the highest? I think that's really, really smart, like that. And also like adds to the fact of like, what do you cost? This is why I'm quoting the client, not like, you know, you're determining that for them. But as things change too, also setting the expectation that things might change, and things probably will change, but things won't change without your approval.
That's a good point.
Just because like, it always sucks when like you're working with someone and then all of a sudden the bill is actually higher than the quote when the quote was a quote, So setting the expectation that things might change, over communicating everything that's happening. And I also think too, something I've been doing is we have the scope and then we have this expected budget. That's like, this is what we're going to be spending on this, but this is the thing that might actually really change depending on like after creative's finished, like what's actually going to happen. And that's always one of the hardest things. Is like, they want a budget for a full production, but you actually don't know what you're making yet. You have to do the creative process first. So it's like, here's kind of a general number to try to make things fit in. That is likely to change. It could even be smaller, it could be bigger, but I think just making sure that the client is with you the whole time and they know what's going on. And like the minute that something changes, you let them know. The dream is to be able to productize everything. Kind of like Sarah was saying, even in being like, here's the hard, cost for everything. Like that's an absolute dream. That's definitely what I'm trying to get to, but especially with video too. And David, you had mentioned something about this, like what is a 1-minute video? You could film something on your phone for like, a couple $100, or it could be $1 million, like,
or 10 million. Yeah.
Crazy range there. So
yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah.
I think like it's interesting too, just like how this has changed over the last 10 years, even with like TV versus like digital media, because there's this suddenly like there was this dichotomy when I worked in advertising of like the TV commercials were millions of dollars, 6-month long thing, and you go cast and you shoot and it's like a massive thing. And TV commercials run for 6 months more. They run for a year sometimes, more. Whereas then on the other side of the spectrum, you have digital media where the shelf life expires quickly, right? Like you post on Instagram and you're done after a day. Like you got to get more content. So it's such a hard thing. And then, you have this hard intersection if you're a big agency where clients are wanting a higher volume of content, but it's too expensive to hire a big agency to be producing that stuff. And so when I was at a big firm, we got a lot of accounts stolen and scooped up by small shops like y'all, honestly, because they didn't want to pay 10 grand for a Facebook video that was going to expire in, a day. And so it's really interesting to just see to just think about what are people paying for when they hire that big agency? Well, it used to be big TV production, and now that's not as necessary anymore. And so there's a big opportunity here, I think, for small shops and independents to step up and win a lot of these bigger brands and bigger businesses. I would love to hear if anybody has any thoughts on the first time maybe that you punched above your weight, as I like to say, really, tried to land a big client or try to, land a big project. Anyone have any feelings about that, terror or happiness?
I mean, yeah, I have a couple of anecdotes that one's mine, one's not mine, but it's such a good story. I'll tell it anyway. A colleague of mine, basically, we work together sometimes. He did one of his first projects out of school. It was 13 grand. They charged the client and they were really scared about it. And oh, okay, this is a big project. They did this video, and then they were in the edit, which Josh will probably agree. They put in some song that they liked, that from some local band. And they were oh, this is good to get a good feel of the vibe of the video. And you should never do that, because the client came back and said, we want that song. That song's great. And so they went to the band, and the band was yeah, we'll license it to you for $20,000, which was, more than the whole video cost. And so they kind of freaked out. They went to the client and they were it's $20,000 to license the song. And they were yeah, sure, sounds good. And then the whole group was we could have charged 60 grand for this 1 minute video, and we charged 10 grand. That has happened so many times to me or to someone else, where there'll be some accident thing happen, and at big agencies and small. This has happened to me as a small agency, but also happened to me when I was working at Vayner on a Budweiser thing, and they wanted some specific song, and we added half the budget over again. I mean, it's
wild. That music
that
can really
be
sneak up on you. Yeah, I've been there too.
That's a huge oh shit moment. Are we really gonna go tell the client this costs double this whole project? But okay.
And then they said yes. Wow, the pain and joy of that.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any, so in terms of the way that you're thinking about your expectation versus reality and your cash flow management, tool stacks, processes, like how does everybody sort of handle the backside of this once people are ready to, you're ready to start invoicing, paying other people out? How does that look to y'all?
I mean, I'll jump in here. I actually would like this part of business, which is I'm weird. This was a surprise to me when I started working, basically. I enjoy this. I have built out a spreadsheet that has like my personal and my business stuff in separate columns, and it's by date going down, and then I have going ins and outs for each of them. So every big transactions, or I try to group them up on certain days. They're all put on the calendar so that I can see, okay, this is the business in and out over time, and then this is my personal in and out over time. I haven't found any other tools like that. If there's an app out there you guys know, or a platform that does that, I would love to use it. But most of them, the way the apps work, they like work in by month-to-month basis, is kind of like, oh, you have these kind of bills coming out next month and you should put some aside. And that's like great. But as you know, sometimes clients will miss their 30-day, net 30. And so I'm like, so knowing like, oh, this client's a little shaky on their 30 days, and plan accordingly is helpful, as opposed to like, looking at it month to month. I want to see it day to day. So anyway, I've built that myself, but
yeah.
I'd love
so is it
you guys should make one.
is anyone doing like what's common for y'all? Are you doing like project kind of based accounting of like seeing where that profitability is like per project, and then there per month is also obviously timeframes are part of it. I always find that like the way that traditional accounting is done and taxes are done actually are so far from like how the business actually runs. It's so fucking frustrating, honestly. But how's everybody else handling it? Y'all doing project-based stuff, or quarterly, monthly? What does your setup look like?
Mostly everything that we do is project-based, and usually it's just kind of the thing of like we try to say like, here's how much we want to retain for in-house, because we're usually a mix of in-house and subcontractor. And yeah, like up to now too, it's just mostly been like a Google Doc or a Google Sheet, kind of with the, like tracking everything and everything out, and aiming for that like 50% retention, where it's like, and that's the scalability part of it too, where early on it was like 100% retention and it just kind of kept dropping down, and like it's like, let's try to make less money from each project but do more projects.
Interesting.
Yeah, but we're project based mostly, and then just kind of as expenses and income comes in, just tracking those and trying to make sure the in's always bigger than the out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No crazy systems though. Probably should spend more time on that. Cash flow is weird.
Yeah, I think it's project based, but I have my goals that I've set. So yes, I had my friend, she was my financial planner first, and we became friends, which is great because now she just loves me. But yeah, it's like, here's my goals. So yes, I have an amount that I want to make, and then for the year, and then I break that down quarterly, and then I know like what type of project I need to try to hit that goal, all with the help of Helen. So that's what I do now. And I'm like, all right, if I know that I haven't sold enough, I don't know, brand strategy or whatever, I need to go prospect and try to get more people to reach that. But it's definitely like project-based and kind of this, yes, I use Notion for everything. Notion's not awesome for the spreadsheet situation, though, but it's where everything else is, so it's there. But I have this huge list of like business expenses. And then I found out how much it costs to be Portia Thomas. So I'm like, incorporating that also to try to like, yeah, it's this much to be me every year. And then the business expenses. So it's a gigantic spreadsheet in Notion, and
Helen.
I learned from Helen. Yeah, I hope that was helpful. I'm like, it's a jumble, but it's kind of organized.
Yeah. Sarah, how's your stack looking?
Similar. So I had a profitability coach that helped me with figuring a lot of that out in early days. When I started smaller, I wasn't really taking into account a lot of stuff. I was just making sure I could clear everything. So I would pre-negotiate rates for subcontractors or teammates. And so we would have like a kickoff before the proposal went out, and we were tracking it in our project management system. all my stuff was funneled through QuickBooks because I'm really bad at keeping track of the actual ins and outs. But then I was managing proposals through like HoneyBook. I'm notorious for having like 9 systems in place, but I usually get them to at least all talk to each other. So she set up this dashboard that basically helped me see where I was losing money. And then similar to Portia, I was able to kind of say like, okay, these types of packages are better because they have a better end result. Everybody gets paid. Like I need to focus on selling this many of these. And then once I was able to kind of articulate those goals, it made it a lot easier to know what I was running after instead of just, oh, do I have enough to clear this when the bill clears?
Yeah.
Yeah, it took a while to like work through that.
Yeah, that's it's funny. Like I feel like you definitely reach an inflection point in like I feel like being a freelancer where I went through that transition of like my biggest problem was like get more clients, and I'm like that's all that consumes you, right? Like there isn't much else that you really can think about, and then you reach an inflection point where you're really starting to grow and things are coming inbound to you, and now you're turning things down, and now you're like, oh, I need to scale up. Like, what does this look like? How does this go from here? Was there anything that surprised y'all when you sort of upgraded your systems or really started to get a hold on your cash flow? Was like, was it like, wow, I'm really spending a lot on this and I didn't realize it, or my margin on these types of projects was really little? Like anything that surprised anyone when you got a hold of that? Or any project types that you think are like I feel like the cross section is like, you could charge a good amount for it and it's easy to deliver and it's not like super complicated. Does anyone have any thoughts on like the packages that you're putting together and like what makes them more or less profitable for y'all?
I mean, I guess when I shifted from working in-house at places to being out on my own, and I think that might have been some imposter syndrome, I had trouble feeling like I could charge for things that were like just me. And so in the beginning, I definitely felt like I had to round out my team to be like this giant team, to be kind of like worthy of having those meetings. And I reached a point where I was like, I am paying teammates very well and like very happy to do that, really excited, like A plus. But if I want to be profitable, like I need to make sure that there are things that I can deliver myself also. And that was like a big aha moment for me. It was like, oh, there's maybe some things I can do that are still just me, and that's okay. And I think that was like a big one for me.
Yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll yes and that back. The tough part for me was I was freelance. Well, I was permalancing, I guess, for a couple, like for an agency, and then had some of my own clients, and it got to a point where I was always charging by my time, and then it got to a point where my time was full, and I was able to do a lot of things a lot quicker than like if something was supposed to be a full day edit, I could probably do that in 3 hours just because I'm getting better at it. And I had like a weird mental block moment of like, I need to start charging differently. This isn't about, if I want to grow past this, I need to get away from charging for how much time I'm spending and the value of the project, who else I'm paying. And the second I just started telling people, yeah, we're a studio, and it's like me and my wife full time, and we hire a bunch of contractors. But when I first started doing, yeah, we're a studio, then it was like, fine. It was absolutely fine. So for me, it was just that mental switch was, I felt really guilty about like, well, am I like double dipping? Am I charging them for time that I'm actually spending on other people's stuff? And it was like, yo, everyone does that.
Yeah.
I just had to get over it.
That's basically a bit small.
Yeah, that's how it works.
So true. I have this conversation all the time. Like my partner is like, you're just scared because you know that you're just like making stuff up essentially, right? It's like you know that it could be cheap or it could be expensive. You're charging a lot. And the reason you're in here freaking out is because you know that it could be cheaper. But yeah, it's all about its mindset. That's the biggest thing I've learned, is that it's just mindset.
Yeah.
I also like to David's point before, like when he started getting faster at editing, it's like you want to reward that behavior. So that's something I also, with like subcontractors and stuff, like you want to incentivize them to be growing and working hard. So if you're just, passing along these hourly rates, it doesn't actually get them to want to do more or grow or be more efficient. So I try to also pass through some of that to them so that it's like, yeah, you guys should get faster or better, or, you know, like whatever better looks like.
And also faster is valuable too. Like, I mean, because we get hired for a lot of sprint stuff, like, and it's kind of messed up. They're like, hey, we need a TV ad in 48 hours. Can you do it? Great, go. And I'm like, okay, like I might spend the same amount of time, I will spend the same amount of time making this entire video as I would if I had a month to do it. But it's being all compressed. And so that means like massive opportunity costs. Also, you know, how much does your sleeping hours actually cost technically, because you're losing those. And hourly is just so easy to like understand and think about and all that kind of stuff. But especially like as you're working with different clients where speed might be valuable, or like you're working harder during those hours, like it just doesn't line up, you know?
Yeah.
And then it makes it hard to grow, exactly as David was saying. Like, and those times, the fact that you can do it faster means that you're good at it. So why should you make less money just because you're spending?
Totally.
You know?
Yeah, and honestly, it takes, you know, they say like can take 10 years to learn how to do this in 10 minutes. And it used to take 10 hours to do it, you know? And so like that experience of getting better should be compensated regardless of if it took 10 minutes or an hour. If you've delivered a quality product, then got to get comped for that. In terms of margins and markups, so from my own business at least, and just like the little data that is out there about this, most service-based businesses are planning for about a 20% margin, but ultimately they end up somewhere around a 10% or lower. Any thoughts on markups, margins, how you think about it? And like, is it the same across everything? I think I heard a few of you say like, sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that. When do you decide, is it about like the size of the client and how much you think you can mark up? Like, how do you sort of think about that?
And it's kind of where my people come from. So I'm a networking queen pre-COVID. I was out getting my network on. So now I'm networking in groups like Slack. And so I noticed if someone comes from a certain Slack group, they're not going to be open to my $197 an hour rate. So then it needs to be a little bit different. So I guess it kind of depends. Oh, and then like business, I know that folks in this group are like brand new, so they're not going to be willing to pay that much. So I kind of, I guess, gauge on that. And then I think if there's anything else. Yeah, I guess it's like, what are they? I guess I'm trying to gauge them before and see. Some people I'm just like, it's not going to work out.
Yeah. So you got to disqualify that.
Yeah, we're too far ahead for, you know, we've been doing this too long to go cheaper than this. But yeah, I have noticed it's definitely based on community for me, or the communities that folks are in.
Interesting, yeah. Anyone else thinking about like percentage of markup and if that changes or if it's the same sort of across all your different things?
I try to do 30% on everything. Where it starts to feel really bad, and like Portia, this is kind of, I think what you were talking about, is when like your 30% markup ends up being $10,000 and you're like, what? How is this even like fair, you know? But it is, and like it's all the like free work. It's the, you know, because doing your taxes actually costs time. Doing proposals and stuff actually costs time. And you know, the bigger the project, the more things that all of those are going to take. It's a lot more coordination with people, because I'm not charging for every 5-minute phone call that I have with a subcontractor.
Yeah.
So I just try to do 30% on everything. And that is, you know, with everything else calculated, if like in New Mexico, we have gross receipts tax, which we have to charge 8% on everything, including services, which in California, and I know a lot of other places, people have been like, why am I being taxed for this? I don't want that to be into my margins. Also, income taxes are fun, and you have to consider all of that when you're pricing stuff. Like, am I actually making any money after tax season? But
yeah, I find that there's a really strong focus. There tends to be almost too strong a focus on like the gross revenue and not enough attention paid to like, where am I actually going to net out here after all of these fees and taxes and everything that comes out of it. That 30% does feel fair for all the work that goes into that, and like you're probably going to end up more like 20% no matter what, you know, because of all that. So I think that's like I think it's a good way to look at it too. From a percentage standpoint, David or Sarah, do y'all think about that process in a specific way?
Yeah, I've tried to make this more of an external thing for me because otherwise I get like, I don't know, I feel bad. I want them to be happy with me, all that stuff. So for me, the way I'm at least developing, working on this is, especially in video, people pay a lot of money for video. So I'll like go find out what they charge, and not so that I can match their prices, but so that I can beat their prices, but then still feel like I'm charging more than I would have without doing that research. So if I'm comparing externally, like what is, some way bigger agency than me charging a similar size company, and then say, great, I'm just going to beat that price, and I'm already a better deal, and I'm probably making more than I would have done if I was just like, well, I don't know, I don't want to make them uncomfortable. So I'm trying to make it more as external as possible, and base it on something that's competitive and feels like a business thing, as instead of me sitting here being like, well, maybe I'll raise my rates a little bit and see how it goes. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sounds like you stole a bunch of the business from the agency that I was at.
Right.
Just like, was it you? You get that Jolly Rancher account?
Right, exactly.
We do have a question in the, we have two questions in the chat. One is about transparency with markups and teammates. Sarah, I think you had talked about this a little bit. You like to sort of be as transparent when you can as possible. How do you think about like when to do that and when to not do that? And when has it caused maybe a problem versus been a good thing?
So I will like pre-negotiate rates with each of my subcontractors. We do like a check-in every 6 months to see if their rate is like still current or if there's some new things that they're offering. But so that allows us to pitch without necessarily checking in with each individual. And we get the flexibility then to, like, based on availabilities, if we need to swap someone, we have someone in mind, but they're not available. But then what we'll also do is, now that we've moved away from doing by hour, we have like packages, and we'll outline all of the things that are included. But we'll also kind of show a rough hours allocation internally. So when we have our internal kickoff, we'll kind of say, Portia, like we have about, 17 hours allocated for this. And so everyone in the kickoff sees that other people have a similar lift on their plate. And I think that kind of helps everyone. So the team has full view of like how many hours are allocated. They have a sense, they won't necessarily know the individual hourly rate, but they know the total budget. Like they know a lot of the details. And so I think by giving them some of that transparency, it helps them know that they're in it and that they can control their own destiny a little bit, which I think is super helpful. So it hasn't really come up to be needing it to be more transparent that I've seen.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's super interesting. I think like we did something similar, and actually I'm curious, I do have a question for all of you about like, so when we were doing the sales, the client wasn't necessarily as concerned about like who the rest of the team was necessarily, right? Like they're like, they trust you, you build that relationship, and then they're like, I trust you, you're gonna pull a team together. Has that been y'all's experience, or like have you met clients who are like, no, I want to meet who else is gonna be on my team, or like what's been the experience there? Because big agencies, like, you get pitched by the chief creative officer and then you never see him again.
One client who wanted to know who. So my proposals are like me talking on a Loom video and explaining everything.
Love
and I
Loom.
wanted
Great.
to see my portfolio for Savannah and then my portfolio for Nosheen. They're my designers. Nosheen costs more than Savannah. She's been doing it longer. She's older than all of us, and she's got like corporate experience. We're all like small agency people. But they have the client has the opportunity to choose, but I quote the highest price no matter what. So even if they choose Savannah, then I'm going to give her what she asked for, and then I'll just take the rest of that because, that's what we do.
Yeah.
But it's definitely like, you can choose. And then on the transparency point, I love everything Sarah was saying. I wanted to talk about that too. I'm very open of how much I'm going to make off of this. And it's kind of like, you're here. So just, this is what it's going to be. And I struggled with that in the beginning. Like, should I tell? I don't want to tell. But then I'm like, why am I tripping about how much I'm going to make about this when this is the ship that I've created and like my brand, So that's that. But yeah, I definitely keep it. I give the client an opportunity to pick who they want, but it's very, it still looks like one thing to the client. That's my main thing. I just want a united front That's the thing. Whoever gets paid, I don't care how much you charge. I'm gonna charge more than that. But it's like the client gets one feel and one company, because that's what we are.
Yeah.
Even though
Yeah,
we're all different.
we totally felt that, like, that the umbrella entity really helps with like validity and like, you know, charging what is you're really worth. And the difference in that terminology, even just being like, I'm freelance versus I'm a studio.
Yes.
It's a total positioning shift.
Yeah, that was another imposter syndrome. That was, what month is this? May? So like in, I guess, March, I was like, I'm an agency. Like, I had to tell myself, believe it. Yes, we're a collective agency, but it took some months to get to that point. But yeah, I've been freelancing since 2009. So now in 2021, I'm an agency.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Transition, it's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
Yeah. There's a big like emotional blocker there, right? Yeah, like, and is it mostly imposter syndrome in that regard? Because I know like we felt it too, and you feel like once you feel that shift of saying freelancer versus like studio agency, whatever, and like the difference in how people even just talk to you when you're talking to potential clients is like, oh, should have done this a while ago. But like anybody else struggle with that shift in mindset? And how'd you overcome it? Did you guys just pull the trigger and just say like, all right, we're just gonna go for it?
I just started saying we.
I was about to say that.
After a while, I didn't even notice I was doing it, and I just started thinking we. And so then it was like, yeah, let me check with our vendors, and like it like the rest happened. I just said we.
Yeah. That was actually part of the reason I did a rebrand. So before Ampersand and Ampersand, I was Short Girl Long Name, and I had a bunch of subcontractors, but they really only dealt with me. And so it was all about me. And as I started taking on bigger and bigger projects, it was so much less about me and so much more about all the other people that were working with me. And so it became more about me and someone else, So then that was the whole impetus for the rebrand, was so that I could say like, it's not just one single person, it is an entire team of people working on it.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. So one question we got in the chat is around capacity and like future bookings. And I totally have been in this seat before where you're like, you know, no matter how amazing your business is going, I feel like there's always a moment where you maybe hit a dry patch, or oops, I should have been spending more time doing, you know, new business. And so when things come in the door, you just want to keep saying like, yes, but you know, you're at capacity now. How do you guys think about booking somebody for a future date? Have any of you done that in terms of like a deposit or start date? Like, how do you manage your capacity and your calendars that way?
Yeah, I mean, we, as part of the proposal, we will say like, we're so excited, like we've reserved a block of time at this time. So we can kind of dictate it based on what we have going on. And we also will only hold spots once we have a deposit. So let's say we're doing a rebrand. It's, you know, we're really excited to be kicking this off on this day. And we won't show up for that like first kickoff meeting if we don't have a deposit, because it also means we could move on to another client project if we needed to. I think both of those things were critical for us to figure out. We didn't do it in the beginning, but then we quickly learned that lesson.
Yeah. Anybody else taking deposits, putting down, and then like staggering start dates, things like that? Does anyone, I think deposit wise, our most common one was, well, if we could get away with it, we would do 50% upfront. You know, we could wiggle down from that, obviously, but if we could get away with it, I always love to take half upfront just because cash flow. Anybody else take deposits in that regard?
Yeah, definitely half upfront. One thing I learned from Helen, she's like, you need the same engagement fee like all the time. That way it'll help you decide, or, you know, like plan. So it's either 1,500 just no matter what, or it's going to be half if it's higher than that. And then in my proposals, I'm like, we can pay the whole team, you know, like you're contributing to all of us and like all this kind of stuff. But that's been super helpful. And then I had to be like, okay, it's 1,500 no matter what you buy. Like I had to be okay with that first. But that's been super helpful. So, but yeah, 50% if I can. And if it's cheaper than 15, then you got to give me 1,500 or whatever.
That's good. That's a good rule of thumb. Like to have that fixed floor is great.
Helen is super militant, so that's been very helpful to have a militant.
I gotta get a Helen.
I know, I love a Helen. Yeah. I will drop her info. I was like, I'm gonna talk about you on this panel.
Everybody go talk to Helen.
Yeah.
In terms of scheduling, we handle that a little differently. We think of it as pods. So no matter how busy we are, if we're at full capacity, we'll find a person who can then run like a pod of some kind. So if me and my wife are the only full-time producers on staff, and so if we are full, we're like, great, yeah, we can take your work. We want to try to always say that, and then we'll pull in a project manager who can then go through our list of contacts and stuff, so that no matter how full we are, we can just always add on incrementally. And we also position ourselves that way as like, we used to work at agencies and, it's overpriced and they're not thinking about blah, blah, and all that stuff. So we try to position ourselves up front as, it's not like a bunch of creatives in a garage somewhere. We have a network of people and we can tap like the right person from our network for your project. So that way they're not thinking like, I'm secretly finding subcontractors. I'm pretty upfront. They're like, no, like we're going to find some people that match your project and they'll be available because they're available. That's kind of how we approach that.
We used a little trick in our sales cycles to speed them up, where we would tell people that we need to know if we're going to move forward with this proposal in the next 72 hours because we can only hold the talent for that long. And then we would basically be like, at that point, like we have other things that we need to allocate across. And so like, if you want to hold this talent, like you put a deposit down now and like, no worries, we'll set up the kickoff call. If not, we'll give you, I think it was 72 hours to like discuss with your team and whatever else. And it feels risky at first because you're like putting a time frame like that on it. You're like, oh, I hope I don't lose this deal. But when you get down to the last part of that sales process, like sometimes getting the ink on the paper is the longest and most annoying part. And we just found that using that as a mechanism to speed it up really, really helped it. And it also inherently sort of made it sound like our talent was really in demand. Like got a lot of demand for these folks. They're super talented. Like if you want to work with them, you got to tell us now, or we got to go.
I'm going to steal that. That's great. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Oh, we got some good questions in here. We are running up on time, but I'm happy to answer these questions because they're great. So if people want to hop off, you can. I'm wondering though, and maybe we should run the wheel of names now, and then if you guys don't mind hanging out for a few minutes, we can answer some of the questions in the chat. That sound good?
Yeah, go for it. Let's do the wheel of names.
Wheel of names. I want to know what Anne Googled to find this tool, but that's probably a story for another day. Okay, cool. So we've literally got a wheel of names. I'm gonna spin this bad boy and then it'll come up and we'll see who won. So we did a little raffle. And tell me if I'm totally messing this up, but I believe it's $100. So we're gonna enter the names of folks in the chat and we'll see what happens. Oh. Okay, Carl, you're not allowed to win. Carl's actually an investor of ours. I feel like I gotta spin that wheel again, just because. I'm like, mom says no. Courtney, all right, Courtney. Well, Anne, I don't know what the rules are here and how Courtney collects her winner. Man, you guys aren't getting the sound effects. I'm getting like a whole Wheel of Fortune thing in my headphones.
Oh my gosh, at least they get the confetti. Courtney, we will reach out to you.
Amazing. Congratulations. I never win things like raffles ever, literally. So I just not one of those humans. That's awesome. All right, so got a couple questions. We'll run down some of these. So best practices in terms of scope of work. Anything that is a non-negotiable for y'all in terms of like a term that you put in there, or I don't know, anything that your clients typically tend to notice or pick up on that you think either works well or creates red flags?
I mean, I treat my scope of works kind of like a wiki, where it's like with any project, I'm kind of updating it for the next one. So I've kind of accumulated a scope of work, some by learning the hard way, some by seeing other people do it really well. And so that it's just like totally evolved. Now I try to be as explicit as possible, where this is in scope, this is out of scope, this is what we do if things need to be added, this is what we do if you're not happy, like you have to give us a chance to fix it, all of that is outlined in the scope of work.
I love that's actually a really good call out. yeah, revisions get out of control so fast. And I feel like that call out of like, if you have to give money back because they're not happy with something, like that whole mitigation situation, like we had to work with,
Kill
we had to work
fees.
our terms. Yeah.
Yeah. Revisions, kill fees, and some kind of management fee always, no matter what.
It's got to be kind of like a syllabus in school where when you ask a question, the professor's like, look at the syllabus.
Yeah. Exactly.
I feel like it's in the fine print. Look.
Yeah. I think it also helps too, because then you can say like, you know, sure, we can do like another revision. Just want to remind you, like extra revisions are whatever, it's in the scope. Like then you're just protected. You're not the bad guy. The document says it. I didn't do anything.
Yeah. So, yeah. You signed it.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, like really granular SOW, this is something that we actually were really struggling with when we were building the database on the Wethos platform, which was like, what do you charge for things that are like more like upfront discovery? You know, you're dancing this line of like, I'm doing sales, but now suddenly I'm kind of consulting now and I should be like billing for this time. Like, how do you charge for that kind of thing? And like, when is the right time? Is it like after that first intro call that you send the scope, or like, how do you draw that line, put that line in the sand? The designers, this happens all the time too. Like, make me a thing for free and let's see how it is. And then I'll take it and never talk to you again. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, I do free discovery calls, but then like the end of the discovery call is I will send you a proposal. And so once it's like a proposal is out in the world, it's kind of on them to decide to continue or not. I also do say, so I offer like strategy and soundboard sessions that are just me. And so I have 2 tiers of that. And so at the end, it's like, if you're not ready to move forward right now with an investment, you can always book these at the ready. And so that's like a Calendly. It's super easy to grab. And then it gives them the ability to kind of say, yeah, I think I just want like a little bit more of the time. But after 15 minutes, like you should know if you're going to get something out of it, I feel like.
Yeah, you kind of get that. You get that inkling. You're like, this is going to work or it's not. Anyone else have a, how to handle that like line between consulting and selling?
I just shortened it. It was like 30 minutes. I was like, this is too much fucking time, but it's 20-minute discovery call. And then I also have 2 strategy session options. One's an hour, one's an hour and a half. So I'm like, if you really want to do some work, book a strategy session, that costs. But our discovery call is really me seeing if you're crazy or not, like if we should work together.
It's like a vibe check.
I'm thinking about implementing this. I haven't yet, but I was like, I need to say like, okay, if we go over 20 minutes, I'm charging you for like an hour after that. So that's my latest possible implementation. You guys want to figure out how that. Sorry, what did you say, Sarah?
I said, do it.
That's what I want to do. We go over because some people will be like, okay, tell me what you think about. And I'm like, it has definitely like been 45 minutes. So that's what I'm thinking. But yeah, it's free to call and then a charge for a strategy. But after the call, I send you my proposal, my video of me talking and all that, which works pretty well. My personality comes across. So I like
the Loom is great. We use Loom all the time. We love to do that. We'd just be like, here's the scope and here's a quick 5-minute Loom. And then like the next phone call was so much more fruitful because you didn't spend the whole time like walking them through the document, you know? And so I love that. If anybody hasn't like checked out Loom.
It's done on meetings. I don't know if I should say that to clients, but that's why I like it.
Yeah, it totally does. It speeds up the sales cycle, I think, for sure. We you know, it's funny, we did this too, the process that y'all are outlining of like you take that first call and then like the very next step is like, here is a general idea of like what the scope's gonna be, because right away for us at least it got to the point where like we needed to qualify those leads, right? And like if you get sticker shock from something that we think is like reasonable, then you know right away and you're not going to waste your time with like 4 phone calls before you can close, you know? So you get to know as soon as possible. That was kind of our rule. It's just like the next best thing to a fast yes is a fast no. Just like keep you lukewarm forever. Subcontractors. So Josh, you said subbing earlier, which I think is awesome. Like maybe we might steal that term. What do you guys think in terms of like a good point or a good idea to start introducing sort of regular subcontractors as team members? And I assume, Darshani, that you're talking about like to the clients, I imagine, or introducing it to the business itself. But I feel like we had varying levels of visibility in terms of who was client facing and who was not. And it was kind of a matter of like what the context was, what the situation, like case by case. But did anybody want to speak to that of like introducing their team members to clients?
I've actually had some situations where clients in their contract that they have, and this is for like city, county, state type stuff, they're like, you can't subcontract anyone. And I think that like that kind of introduced me to like this idea of like, oh, subcontractors kind of have this bad vibe of like, oh, well, these are people who you just take your work, you cut a margin, you do nothing, and you just give it to them for cheaper.
Outsourcing, that has like a vibe to it.
At that point.
Yeah.
So I've and it is like checking to like seeing how I feel about clients. Some of them I'm just like, yeah, we'll just get this done, and then I'm working with someone else. But especially in proposals now for big stuff, I am like, here's the people who are planning on working with this. If it changes, we'll be like, hey, here's this person. Usually it's for bigger projects that I try to just put their face on the Canva that we're making them.
Yeah. Anyone else like highlight the team members in like a deck proposal, that kind of thing?
For us, we're a collective of freelancing women. So I put everyone on my about page. These are the folks that are on our team because I wanted to present as an agency. And then 2 of them I know from an agency. So side note, I got fired from my agency job last July whenever I relaunched my website. So originally Go Work Girls was like community. We're going to teach you how to do branding and da da da. And so I got fired whenever I hired Savannah to redo my branding because our old boss was like, oh, you guys are working together. You're going to create an agency. And so now we're an agency. But I did that. Now we have to like be this, I decided we're going to be this front, right, of like an agency because as Sarah was saying, it's easier to charge whenever you're an agency. you feel more comfortable with that. So I know Savannah, and then Malika, who also does our web, she was at the agency as well. When I got fired, Malika quit the same day because we're in solitary. It's like this. She quit. So me, Savannah, and Malika are all from the agency. And then Nosheen, I know from, I'm a Texan, I used to live in Dallas. I know her from like 2008. So I know everybody. And I don't plan on like getting new people. I mean, maybe if I have to, but like this is my crew of people that I actually know. So we're a united front. We're all like together on the team. And so yeah, when I'm presenting, I'm like, here are the folks that are on the team. And then since I have 2 designers, you can choose one or the other. But I definitely want to present like, here are the people on the team. At the agency, her proposals were like, here's everyone, and here's our little bio. I thought that was cool. I'm grateful for that agency job that I got fired from because I learned a lot.
Yeah, same. learned a lot working at an agency, and also a lot of things I like didn't want to do. I just was like, oh, won't be doing that.
Because we're like, she charges like $20,000 for this. We can totally do that because we were the ones doing the work,
Yeah, and that's what it is at the end of the day, right? Like all an agency, quote unquote, has to claim is its people, the people that deliver the work. And so when you're charging, $200,000 versus $20,000, at the end of the day, it could be the same exact people who came out of these big agencies in New York, the same talent, and you could charge that much, and more money is going to go into the independent's pockets because you're not taking in all that overhead that a big agency is going to do. And so we love to pitch that basically to clients. Like we would pitch, power of an agency at a fraction of the cost. And then even coming in at $50K was better than maybe the bigger establishments that they were talking about. And we were like, we come from that world. Our network is from that world. And then like we used to have a joke where I used to write everybody's bios because I like to get people hyped about who's on the team. And we had like a couple hundred freelancers that we were curating teams from. And I would like right off the bat, we had a joke that I was like writing like chopped intros. Like I just got them and be like, this is Josh. And I would just like get them hype off the team. And it just like, I don't know, there's something about that that like closes the deal. Cause I'm like, this is perfect. He's perfect for you. He comes from this background. He knows this. And then hit him with the costs. And then they're so hyped about the team that they're just like, all right, like, where do I sign? And we're like, yeah, let's fucking go. Any other thoughts on that before we wrap up here? I think we got everybody's questions, but any other thoughts on that? Ooh, anyone deal in part equity? That's a good one. I've actually heard this come up more often than lately. And there's actually another studio owner, Zach, who I interviewed on the Leap last night, who I know is kind of exploring this. Has anybody ever done like a part equity, part commission situation?
I haven't done equity. I have done a little bit of commission. So for new offerings with my like collective, because we have this like non-exclusive, like they'll agree to stuff. It's like if you then help invest some time in making us better, like we can help make you a little better. So when we're introducing new product rollouts, if they bring in referrals and stuff like that, it's more like a referral network, like trying to do that.
Yeah.
They'll get a commission based on what they help bring in.
Oh man, we should do a panel on referrals because that's a whole other beast. But yeah, there's a whole business in that for sure.
No,
like,
I'm trying to crack that now. I would definitely attend.
we've actually got a few folks who like that's their main business, and it's a little bit of a different beast, but I mean, it's awesome.
I've done a little bit of that with so the last company I worked at was a YouTube focused company, a big agency that did lots of YouTube channels for a bunch of big brands, and then I've done a little bit of that with our studio too. It doesn't always work, so I kind of try to avoid it. But especially on the YouTube side, if you're saying sure, like we have a base fee that covers mostly our time to make sure that we're not screwing ourselves, and then if you get ad revenue off of ads on YouTube, so we get a certain percentage of it, and that's pretty common in the like YouTube multi-channel network world of video, like where there's influencers and stuff. But that can be really tough because there's like a kind of threshold where anyone makes money. So we try to kind of avoid that. But if we're going to do that, it has to be a combo of like this much. And then if for some reason it works out, then yay for everyone. But we try not to do just an equity split because that usually doesn't work.
Yeah, I like mutual investment.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Those are good words. Amazing. Well, look, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I know we ran a little bit over, but we really appreciate it. So many good insights here. I feel like there's so much in common with how everybody kind of deals with these things. And at the same time, like everyone does it a little bit differently. And at the end of the day, for us, I come from being an independent. I come from being a creative. Our whole thing, we're here really because we want to put more money into independents' pockets. And I think in order to do that, we've got to talk about this stuff. We've got to talk about the money, and it shouldn't take 5 spreadsheets and an accountant to figure out if you have a margin or not, right? So that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. And I really appreciate the time and the energy and the effort today. If anybody wants to reach out to us afterwards, my inbox is open. I'm at Rachel@wethos.co. We'll send a follow-up email with the link to the video from the session and ways to just reach out. But thank you all again. Really appreciate it. And happy little Thursday. No, fuck. Happy little Friday, everybody. I was like, God, that was almost good. That'll haunt me like a week from now. I'll remember that one moment. Like, God damn it.
Wake up at 2:30 in the morning. Dang it.
Yeah, just like pop up and oh fuck, why did I do that? It's good. All right, team. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See y'all later.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.